Amelie truly believed she had found the man of her dreams, the one who would make her happy forever. But after 4 years of marriage, brutal reality set in, and she realized her fairy tale had turned into a suffocating nightmare. She felt completely trapped, like a caged bird with no chance of escape. The man she once thought was the ideal companion, her perfect partner, revealed himself to be a true wolf in sheep's clothing, disguised as affection and tenderness. Amelie had been deceived in a devastating way, and what hurt her most was having blindly believed in him. However, when a new security guard came into her life, a small spark of hope began to ignite within her, rekindling her desire for a fresh start, a chance at freedom. Amelie was completely paralyzed with terror when her husband, Henry, began to shout uncontrollably after a business dinner she had attended with him. All because she simply wished one of his colleagues a good night, but Henry's possessive jealousy had become unbearable. In public, he maintained the facade of the perfect husband, always polite, kind, attentive, and with a courteous smile on his face. Her friends and acquaintances would always say to her, "You're so lucky, Amelie, he's so handsome, so rich, and clearly adores you." Henry knew exactly how to play the role of the ideal husband, without raising any suspicion about his true nature. 4 years earlier, Henry had masterfully known how to win Amelie's heart. At the time, she was working as a waitress in a restaurant to pay for her psychology studies, and it was in that bustling environment that she met him. Henry was a regular customer, always impeccably dressed, with a distinctive cologne that caught attention. Although they exchanged curious glances, he never took the initiative to speak to her. Until one day, Amelie made a small mistake while serving, due to the nervousness caused by her final exams, and Henry, in an extremely cordial manner, said it was no problem at all, but that he would forgive her on one condition: that she accept a dinner invitation from him. At first, she refused, stating she would only consider the offer after the end of the semester. He was patient and politely asked for her phone number. On the last day of class, Henry called to ask if she had passed her exams, and invited her to celebrate the signing of an important contract at his renowned law firm. Seeking to relax and perhaps give love a chance, Amelie ended up accepting. If Amelie had the slightest idea of what the future held, she certainly would have chosen to go out with her friends and delete his number from her phone. But unfortunately, fate took another path. They went to dinner, and Henry did everything to make the night perfect. He listened to her attentively, praised every aspect of her personality, and made her feel like a true princess, treated with respect and affection. After taking her home, he continued to arrange other dates, making Amelie believe, little by little, that she had found the Prince Charming of her dreams. Over time, the dates became more frequent, and the relationship evolved into something serious, culminating in a grand and seemingly happy wedding. At the beginning of the marriage, Henry promised Amelie the world. He said she could focus entirely on her studies to become a renowned psychologist, and even assured her he would secure an internship for her once she graduated. He not only won Amelie's heart but also the trust of her family, who saw him as the ideal son-in-law. However, behind this mask of perfection was a false and hollow love. In truth, Henry was a narcissist who didn't truly love her. To him, Amelie was nothing more than a valuable possession, an object of control and manipulation. As time went by, he isolated her from everyone around her, pushing away friends and family, and 4 years later, Henry had destroyed almost everything in her life. In moments of anger, Henry would sometimes grip Amelie's shoulders so tightly that he physically hurt her, raised his hand to threaten her, and his shouting was terrifying. As an influential lawyer with powerful connections, he constantly threatened her. "If you try to run away, I will take revenge on your family." Amelie felt completely powerless. How could anyone report such a powerful man? How could she prove the abuse she was enduring? The house was always surrounded by security guards, under the pretext that Henry worked in a dangerous field and might have clients seeking revenge. Everything seemed perfectly calculated. He claimed he was protecting his beloved wife, but in reality, it was just another way to expose his psychopathic nature. Henry's obsession with control reached the point where he forbade her from using contraceptives, believing that she belonged to him completely. However, Amelie knew that bringing a child into the world with Henry, as the father, would be catastrophic. So she sought help from the maid, who had become her confidant, to buy birth control pills in secret. She knew that if Henry found out, the consequences would be terrible for both of them. The worst part of all this was Amelie's obligation to pretend everything was fine in front of everyone, as if she were living in an endless nightmare with no way out. She desperately wondered how she could get rid of that monster without hurting the people she loved. Then, something significant changed at the company, leaving Henry even more unstable and nervous. The threat he had spoken of so often materialized. Involved in illegal activities, he began to need more security around him. It was in this context that Theo appeared. He was the ideal security guard. A black belt in martial arts, an ex-military man with precise aim, capable of neutralizing any threat within seconds. Theo was hired to ensure that no one could approach the property and to stay by Amelie's side at all times. Henry's enemies knew that his greatest weakness was his wife, and now she was even more imprisoned. However, Amelie was so exhausted and emotionally destroyed that she no longer cared. Perhaps death would be an easier way out than continuing to live through that torture. Despite having studied psychology to help others, she couldn't even save herself. Without hope, she spent her days in the garden, watching the birds fly freely and smelling the flowers, envying them for being able to go wherever they wanted without any ties. As the days passed, Theo began to notice Amelie during the brief moments he accompanied her outside the house. He noticed that she avoided eye contact with people but couldn't help noticing her honey-colored eyes, full of sadness, and her slender body, though too thin. He could feel her silent pain but knew his job was only to ensure her safety. Day after day, the screams coming from inside the house echoed, and Theo witnessed the marks on her arms, fueling his growing anger towards Henry. If you are enjoying this story so far, make sure you are subscribed to our channel, because the next ones will be even more exciting, and you won't want to miss them. So let's continue. On a dark and silent night, like so many others Amelie had already faced, something seemed darker than usual. The clock was nearing midnight when Henry finally arrived home, staggering, reeking of strong alcohol. He could barely keep his eyes open, but the rage on his face was evident. Amelie, exhausted after a long and tiring day, was curled up in bed trying to sleep. The sound of Henry stumbling over the furniture woke her, and panic quickly took over her body as she saw his shadow approaching the bed. Henry threw himself on Amelie with all his weight, moving aggressively, his words coming out as slurred, incoherent murmurs, loaded with alcohol and rage, as he tried to force her to submit to his impulses. Amelie, panicking, fought with all the strength she could muster, desperately trying to push him away, but he was much stronger, and every movement made her feel even more powerless. Her heart raced frantically, as fear and despair completely overwhelmed her. With one final burst of courage, she managed to break free and ran to the living room, gasping for breath and terrified, as if her life depended on it. Henry, though drunk, was furious, and his eyes full of hatred followed her like a predator stalking its prey. When he reached her, he grabbed her long hair with cruel brutality, pulling a deep cry of pain from Amelie, which echoed through the house. Amelie tried to pull back, but he yanked her violently, raising his hand as if about to strike her with force. The eyes that she had once believed were full of love were now abysses of cruelty and fury. At that exact moment, like a bolt of lightning cutting through the sky during a storm, Theo appeared in the room. Always vigilant, he had heard the desperate screams and ran to see what was happening. Confronted with the horrifying scene before his eyes, he didn't hesitate for a second. With the skill of a highly trained professional, He quickly approached Henry, giving him no time to react, pressing a vital point in his neck, striking the jugular vein. Within seconds, Henry collapsed to the floor unconscious, as if a switch had been turned off, leaving the room in an unsettling silence. Amelie, still in shock, was curled up in a corner of the room, her eyes wide with terror, her body trembling and her breathing rapid. Theo, noticing her state, approached her with slow and careful steps, as one would approach a wounded and frightened animal, fearing to worsen the situation. He knelt beside her, moving as gently as possible, and began to softly stroke her hair, trying to bring some comfort to the devastated woman before him. Amelie, still overwhelmed with fear, instinctively recoiled, as if expecting more violence, but Theo remained still, respecting her space and time. He wrapped her in his strong arms, conveying a sense of safety and protection that she hadn't felt in years, something she had forgotten. "Calm down, Mrs. Amelie, everything is okay now. I promise I'll never let anyone hurt you again," he said, his voice a soft and reassuring whisper, which made Amelie's body tremble, but this time not from fear, but from deep relief. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to relax in someone's arms, feeling truly protected. Theo's voice was like a balm soothing her emotional wounds. In that moment, Amelie realized that perhaps she could trust someone again. She was impressed by how easily Theo had taken Henry down, a man she had always believed to be uncontrollable and untamable. He lifted Henry's unconscious body with impressive ease, almost without effort, and laid him on the sofa, as if he were a rag doll, insignificant. Theo then turned to Amelie, who was still sitting on the floor, and said with a calmness she envied, "When he wakes up, tell him he fainted because of the alcohol. I'll be around in case he tries anything again." With a gentle yet firm gesture, Theo picked Amelie up in his arms, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and carried her back to the bedroom. He laid her down softly on the bed, like placing something fragile in its place, and left to prepare some hot tea. When he returned, he found Amelie nestled among the pillows, still trying to calm her frayed nerves. Theo handed her the cup of tea and sat beside the bed, silent but present. The attention and care he showed were so rare in her life that she hardly knew how to react to such unexpected kindness. As the warmth of the tea traveled down her throat, warming her body and bringing a comfort she hadn't felt in a long time, Amelie realized that, for the first time in years, there was someone who truly cared about her. Theo wasn't just a bodyguard, he was like an anchor amid the chaos of her life. Someone who would be there to help her when she needed it most. Someone who finally made her feel safe again. Amelie didn't fully understand why Theo was willing to take so many risks for her. Why was he so determined to help her face Henry? What did he see in her that made him act this way? Over time, Amelie began to observe Theo more closely, seeking opportunities for private conversations when they were alone. He spoke on various topics with a depth that surprised her, and Amelie, with her psychologist's instinct, knew how to engage in the conversations in a natural and pleasant way. Gradually, something started to change within her. She began to smile again, something she hadn't done in a long time, and Theo was the first to notice, feeling enchanted by that delicate smile. Without realizing it, Theo had also fallen in love with Amelie, and with that came a growing need to protect her at all costs. His concern for her was so great that many nights he couldn't sleep, fearing she might need him at any moment. Theo lived in the pool house, from where he had a clear and constant view of the main residence. Whenever she could, Amelie discreetly opened the bedroom curtain to signal that everything was fine. Theo's silent but protective presence began to restore something Amelie had lost: hope. She started dreaming about the future again, about pursuing her career as a psychologist, helping others who also suffered, and perhaps even opening her own clinic. Additionally, Amelie started taking better care of herself, paying more attention to her diet and regaining her lost self-esteem. Above all, she longed to truly live again. Meanwhile, her husband, Henry, was becoming increasingly involved with his secretary, an ambitious woman who only sought financial gain and an easy path. Like any narcissist, Henry was a great hypocrite. The jealousy he displayed towards Amelie was merely a reflection of his own guilt and betrayals. While keeping Amelie trapped in a relationship full of manipulation and abuse, he amused himself with other women, leaving her alone for long periods. But in a way, this was a relief for Amelie, as when he returned home, reeking of tobacco and alcohol, he rarely sought her out. Amelie began to feel a deep repulsion towards Henry. His gestures, which once seemed normal, now disgusted her. More and more, she found herself thinking about Theo. She knew she shouldn't entertain such thoughts, but she couldn't help it. Theo was so strong, always smelling good, and incredibly kind to her. Theo's protective voice echoed in her mind like a constant refrain, and she was surprised by the growing desire to be closer to him. It doesn't make sense to think about this now, she told herself, trying to push those feelings away. The last thing you need is to think about another man right now. But one day, as she opened the curtain to signal that everything was fine, she saw him without a shirt. Their eyes locked for a few minutes, as if they were hypnotized by each other. It seemed like Theo could read Amelie's deepest thoughts, and the connection between them was so intense that it seemed to arise from the depths of their souls. That night, Theo needed a cold shower. As the water ran down his body, he tried to extinguish the burning desire that made him think of her constantly. He knew he had to act quickly to get her out of the clutches of that monstrous husband. Amelie deserved to be truly loved and protected. Just thinking about how Henry treated her made Theo so furious that, without realizing it, he punched the shower wall. But what he truly wanted was to make Henry pay for all the harm he had done to Amelie. Henry had to take a long business trip. Normally, he always insisted on taking Amelie with him, not because he cared about her company, but to keep her under constant surveillance, ensuring that she was under his control. This time, however, he had made other plans. He intended to take his mistress, leaving Amelie behind under the care of Theo, his loyal security guard. Confident in his position, Henry could never imagine that this trip would mark the beginning of the collapse of his power over Amelie. For the first time in a long time, she would have a few days of freedom, away from his controlling gaze, and she would have Theo by her side. Though she knew the dangers Henry had accumulated with his enemies over the years, and that going out alone would be risky, Theo gave her the space and trust she needed to do whatever she wished, without fear. One night, as Amelie relaxed by the pool, sipping a drink and contemplating the starry sky, something caught her attention. The lights in the pool house were on, and she noticed Theo inside, training intensely. He punched the punching bag with impressive force, his movements precise and determined. The sight of Theo, so strong and focused, made Amelie's body tremble, a mix of fascination and desire. Later, she approached the pool house door, carrying a meal as an excuse to start a conversation. She casually asked if he had already had dinner. They sat down and began to talk, and as the conversation flowed, Amelie, feeling increasingly comfortable, started to open up about the abuse Henry had inflicted on her over the years. She also shared her dreams, speaking passionately about her desire to open a clinic and work as a psychologist, helping others overcome their traumas. Theo listened attentively, absorbing every word, enchanted by the determination and strength he saw in Amelie, even in the face of so much suffering. During the conversation, as they sat on the living room carpet, Amelie noticed a large scar running across Theo's arm. Curious, she asked about the origin of that mark. Theo then told her that the scar was the result of an attack he had suffered years before, during an operation where he almost lost his life after a confrontation with the dangerous mobster. He had nearly bled to death that day but survived. Amelie carefully touched the scar and asked if it still caused him pain. Theo, with a slight smile, replied that it didn't, that the physical pain had disappeared over time. Then he slowly moved closer with a deep gaze and gently touched Amelie's face. Just as this scar doesn't hurt anymore, I also want to heal your pain, my dear. I want to end all the suffering you carry, he said, his voice soft and full of compassion. Unable to resist the intensity of the moment, he pulled her closer, making her sit on his lap. Their gazes locked intensely, and in that instant, the flame of love between them ignited with a force neither had expected. Theo's strong hands wrapped around Amelie's waist, and she let out a soft sigh, almost relieved to finally feel something other than fear or pain. At that moment, Amelie was certain she had never loved Henry, that she had never experienced the pleasure and passion she now felt in Theo's arms. Unable to contain the desire growing between them, they kissed intensely, a kiss filled with passion and repressed desire, as if their lips had been made to meet at that exact moment. After the kiss, the two remained close, breathless, and Theo, his voice still hoarse with emotion, whispered in Amelie's ear, "I desire you more than I can express, but I promise we will only be together fully when I free you from this man. When I take you away from here, you'll be completely happy, free to be mine." Amelie, feeling a mix of relief and hope, responded sincerely, "I want to know true love. I want to be truly happy. I'll wait for you and your promise." Then she asked, almost as a confirmation, "There's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy, is there?" Theo, with infinite tenderness in his voice, replied, "No, my love, there's nothing wrong with that. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Though the desire between them was undeniable, they both knew they needed to act cautiously and correctly. The challenge ahead was immense. How would Theo free Amelie from the clutches of a man as powerful and cruel as Henry? The road ahead was fraught with danger, but life seemed about to smile on Amelie again, even if she wasn't fully aware of it yet. Very soon, Henry would begin to pay for all the harm he had caused over the years, and justice in some way would be served. When Henry returned from his trip, something was clearly different about him. He entered the house in a hurry, went straight to the safe, and grabbed some important documents, his face full of worry. Without any explanation, he ordered Amelie to pack immediately, saying they would spend several months abroad. But this time, something had changed within Amelie. With a courage she didn't even know she possessed, she faced him for the first time, saying that if he wanted to leave, he should go alone. It was the first time Amelie had dared to defy Henry so directly. Henry, surprised and furious, violently pushed her against the wall, shouting angrily, "Have you gone mad? Do as I say now." However, Amelie, filled with renewed inner strength, responded firmly, "I'm not going anywhere with you, Henry." Henry's rage exploded. He lunged at Amelie with violence, delivering a slap that echoed through the room, leaving her face burning with pain. Then he grabbed her hair, ready to inflict even more suffering, but Amelie, now more prepared, remembered the defense techniques Theo had taught her. With a precise kick to Henry's legs, she managed to free herself from his grip and ran desperately toward the pool house, where she knew she would be safe with Theo. However, when she entered his room, she was completely shocked by what she saw. Listening equipment, weapons, and various other items she didn't recognize were scattered around the room. Who was Theo really? Wasn't he just a bodyguard? What had he been hiding all this time? Could he have been pretending to be someone he wasn't? The two stared at each other for a long moment, the silence between them heavy with unspoken questions and truths on the verge of being revealed. Theo, with determination in his eyes, knew it was time to free Amelie once and for all, and he would do whatever was necessary to ensure they had a future together. But first he had to finish what he had started. And now, what did fate have in store for these two? Would Amelie finally break free from the chains that bound her, both physically and emotionally? Could she and Theo truly be together and live the life they both desired? The answers to these questions, along with many shocking revelations, intrigues, and moments of high tension, were still to come. But all of that would be revealed in the second part of this story. So don't forget to subscribe to follow the next thrilling events, and we'll see you in the next chapter. See you soon.